development. We will be talking about early warning, income diversification, food system transformation for building resilience. We have an interesting discussion for you today. But before we start, we would like to have some opening remarks from the ICPAC director. Let me welcome Dr. Guleda to the stage to give us some remarks.
Thank you very much, Linda. Good afternoon, all. Good afternoon. It's past lunchtime, so let me start first on behalf of IGAD and on my behalf. I would like to welcome you all to this side event, Teamed Early Warning, Livelihood Diversification, and Food Systems Transformation for Resilient Building in Africa. I would like to acknowledge our other co-organizers of the event, the KIT Institute, the Med Office Hadley Center, and Chatham House. Let me start by pointing out the fact that to address the problems created by climate change can only be addressed by policies built on solid science. And no place on earth is more under pressure from climate change and variability than the Horn of Africa. On the last 10 years, we had 3 major droughts and 2 major flooding events, one ongoing on right now, with over 1 million people displaced and over 3 million people affected. My organization, the IGAD Climate Prediction and Adaptation Center, is a specialized climate center for East Africa that focuses on climate monitoring, prediction, and early warning systems. Our primary goal is to provide timely and accurate climate information to our member countries to make informed decisions and to build a resilience to climate-related challenges. ICPAC plays a crucial role in developing and disseminating early warning information related to climate events such as droughts, floods, and cyclones that we're seeing more often. By doing so, ICPAC helps communities in our region and governments and various stakeholders to prepare for and respond to those climate-related challenges. This side event offers a knowledge-sharing, networking, and exploring actionable options for the challenges posed by climate change. In that regard, the issue that we're going to discuss in this event, mainly early warning and livelihood diversification for food systems transformations, has a lot of relevance for COP28, and I might add at IGAD, this is the 3rd event that we're during this COP event that we're doing on food systems. The progress and achievements made here at COP28 over the last 2 weeks are very encouraging. The landmark agreement to activate a loss and damage fund is worth mentioning, although I'm not sure it will ever materialize. I hope that the final negotiation text of COP28 will address and capture all issues of concern, including the phasing out of fossil fuel use. For our region, where we work at IGAD, the IGAD region, climate is a sustainability development issue which requires social, technological transformation in all socio-economic sectors. For those of you who don't know, the IGAD region is about 60% arid and semi-arid, where pastoralism is a way of living. And on the last 14 years, every 4 years we had a major drought. The last one has lasted for 5 seasons. And to give you an example, for a pastoralist to restock, it takes usually 5 to 6 years. Our pastoralists never had a chance of restocking in the last 15 years. So that's challenging their livelihoods. IGAD has developed a regional climate change strategy that aims to mainstream climate change across socioeconomic sectors in our region. One of the things that we do is policy mainstream, and climate change is one of them. Our climate change has 19 priority areas, with 11 of them cross-sectoral. We have also a disaster risk management strategy that has been validated by our member countries and is in line to the Sender framework. Yesterday we have unveiled actually 2 frameworks, one on early warning and anticipatory action. And we believe actually anticipatory action is the best way of dealing with disasters instead of being reactive, to be more proactive in our dealing with disasters. I believe that to confront climate change, we require to implement strategies that are climate smart everywhere in the globe, not only in Africa, but across the globe. Because this is a problem that doesn't have a boundary. This issue that we're dealing in Africa wasn't created by Africa. Our contribution is almost negligible. I've seen figures from 3 to 4%, so it's almost negligible. And finally, let me once again thank you for joining us today. I wish you a successful and productive side event. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Tan. I'll welcome our panelists to take the stage now. We're going to do this in 2 sessions. Like you've heard, the African continent is fallen victim to multiple and compounded risks. And we're going to be discussing some of those risks from 2 perspectives, one from the scientific side, and then secondly, we'll hear from our panelists on what the implications are on food systems. So I'm going to welcome our panelists to take the floor. Dr. Ahmed Amdihun from ICPAC. We have Dr. Pete Falloon from the Met Office. We have Professor Harald Kunstmann from the Karlsruhe Institute of Technology. Dr. George, please take the stage as I call your name. George Hemlosh from KIT as well, who'll be supporting Harald, and then Professor Tim Benton from Chatham House, who's already on stage. We have Ms. Lauren Akinyi, who's the Chief of Staff and Head of Partnership at the World Farmers Organization, Kenya. And we will start with 3 scientific presentations, just giving us an overview on what the science is saying. And the first on stage will be Dr. Ahmed. Dr. Ahmed, you can go ahead and give your presentation. Just take the platform, come.
Good afternoon, all. Thank you very much, and indeed, a very exciting side event, particularly touching on early warnings, livelihood, income diversification, and also food system transformation. Colleagues, I'll be bringing perspectives from one of the finest institutions from Eastern Africa, ICPAC, a designated regional climate center. overall, I think as the director of ICPAC have highlighted, the East Africa region particularly is reeling from drought, a multi-year drought to a multi-year floods, which is exceptionally challenging for communities to diversify their livelihoods, but also maintain their income, their livings. So I think if you see this graph, it basically touches on a number of climate extremes that the Eastern Africa region has been experiencing. In fact, for communities, giving communities no time to recover from drought before floods take over. As we speak, the region is actually experiencing an extensive flooding, which affected about 3 million people within a span of 3 weeks only. So that is, I think, the issue that's at hand. That's what's calling actually an early warning system, an end-to-end early warning system, a timely but also a necessity for a frontier areas like Eastern Africa region. This is what we are talking about. This is a video. The one you see in my left is extensive flooding that has affected Garissa, part of Kenya, but also the floods were very extensive in Somalia and parts of Ethiopia. The impact just for Somalia were reflected there, but all the 3 countries have been affected quite immensely. This is as a background. Okay, the video just started, but just to give you the extent of the flooding due to enhanced rains, because the region is experiencing an El Nino event. Colleagues, in the face of such challenges, the role of climate centers, regional climate centers, national hydrometeor institutions is quite central. Particularly, ICPAC provided a regional climate outlook forum in August. So the information was there. This map you see is basically the seasonal climate outlook, which depicts the exact area where we expected exceptionally heavy rainfall, and as was expected also, it happened. The real issue is now how can we translate this or such informations which are there into an actionable plan, particularly at the country, but also subnational and local level. ICPAC also generates with member countries an advisories, what we call the Seasonal Climate Outlook Forum, which ICPAC is holding in the region. And an outcome of that regional outlook forum is a very important document for decision makers. So this seasonal document, before the start of every season, ICPAC calls at least 7 sectors from each country. They sit, they deliberate on the possible impact of the forecast, and also they generate advisories for their respective countries. The real now issue is, can we further advance this to inform the national preparedness plans? I think that is where more efforts are needed. As we advance our forecast, especially forecast skills, we also need to make sure that our early warnings are translated into early action. Again, this is one of the efforts that ICPAC has put in place. If I start from this side, as we all know, early warning systems can be put into 3 key processes. The first part is the infrastructure, which is quite key, including the stations on the ground, the facility to run models, but also monitor major hazards in the region. The second component is the system. How can we translate such extreme rainfall events into a decision-ready information? So this East African Hazard Watch provides a multi-hazard visualization, but also analysis platform, which has been there over the last few years. And ICPAC is actually, ICPAC has developed this platform as an open source and multi-hazard platform, which is being used by a number of partners, including the humanitarian agencies and member states. The real point here is, in addition to the infrastructure, having a system, preferably an open source platform system, really can help the region to understand the possible impacts of certain extremes and take appropriate actions. There are some countries which have activated, for example, their early action, their anticipatory action, but the level of activation and the level of impact was totally incomparable. That's why we see over 100 lives lost, and also about 3 million people have been affected. So this is one of the systems that we need to further advance to refine the informations for targeted early warning and early action. Going forward, again, in this background, ICPAC has a robust multi-hazard situation room, which provides actually, a robust monitoring of major hazards and also communicates with member states directly. This also gives an opportunity to directly communicate regional informations to national informations for action. Although that needs to be supported by more formal documents like the protocol that member states, when thresholds are exceeded, member states need to know exactly when and what type of actions they need to undertake. In addition to, for example, having the extreme climate events, I think having threshold and triggers is quite essential. We are launching version 2 of the drought watch, for example, I think before the end of the year or early next year. But the third version, or what we call version 3.0, will address thresholds and triggers. We'll try to define thresholds and triggers for different hazard scenarios so that member states exactly know when to take actions. And predefined and pre-identified actions are also key. We'll be supporting them along that line. Just yesterday, we launched a regional document on anticipatory action. The key element, again, is capacity, especially at country level. Capacity to forecast, to monitor at least major hazards and also activate anticipatory actions. This requires a strong institutional setup at a country level, going to the local level. This regional center is also feeding into the Africa Union Commission. What other things we are advancing at ICPAC is, in addition to trying to improve the forecast, for example, a brilliant project with Google to try to use machine learning to improve forecast. We just started this year, towards advancing towards impact-based forecasting. Again, an expert is working on a machine learning techniques to automate the whole system of impact-based forecasting, which stands to be a 7-step process. So hopefully, early next year, let's say second quarter of next year, ICPAC should have to have an operational impact-based forecasting tool, which takes into consideration other risk parameters in addition to the hazard, exposure and vulnerability aspects will be taken into action. This is, I think, key, especially for a targeted anticipatory action. Over the years, I think we have improved really from a regional and national, even global centers, the information that's provided as early warning. The real issue, the real gap is how that translates into action, especially at a community level. In summary, this may be my last slide. The difference between the red and the blue is what is manageable. The rest is a residual risk, which can be taken care by risk transfer and other mechanisms. So what we are trying to do is, if we act in advance, the WFP was yesterday reporting that you can reduce the humanitarian needs by half. That's from their pilots. So that's significant. That means timely early warnings, accurate, targeted early warnings can significantly reduce impacts. They are cheaper and they are also more dignified than a crisis management, than humanitarian aid in this region. So that's, I think, what we should be aiming, and ICPAC is targeting towards launching the 3.0, which is on triggers and thresholds. The second point is, I think, more investment. That's at COP28, actually. What we are calling for is more investments, and partnerships are key, especially to expand those 3 areas, the infrastructure, systems, but also capacity at the country level. I rest my case, and thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmed. When you see me standing, it's because I'm giving them pressure and they have 1 more minute left. So that's why he rushed through. You still had like a few more seconds if you wanted to go over. But thank you very much for keeping time. You got us to the end in your own pace. I want to welcome Pete Falloon from the Met Service. He will be giving a presentation on the role of building weather and climate services and early warning systems in building resilience. Pete.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon. I'm going to talk to you a little bit about, in more general terms, I think we've heard some really excellent examples of how ICPAC's taking forward some of this area in detail, which is really good because some of my work's been done for me. But I think really I'll move on and think, thinking about what we've learnt and what are some of the key principles in delivering weather and climate services to have an impact and to help transform and make change happen on the ground. I want to start quite broad, really, and again, I know it's something also our colleagues at ICPAC are strong on and embrace too, that really the need for seamlessness and the benefits of bringing together weather and climate information right across space and timescales to have an impact, support early warning action all the way through from using near-term, short-scale, localized specific forecasts and early warnings in food security and farming, tactical decisions out to thinking about long-term climate change risks. And of course, it's not just about agriculture, it's also about those impacts right across the food system and the food chain. So I'm going to use some examples and lessons from a program that we've been fund managing with the Foreign and Commonwealth and Development Office in the UK for quite some time, and I think I'll come back to this theme about long term. It was also brought up very nicely now just by Ahmed, which I think is really important too in this, but called WISER, which is around weather and climate information services. We're now running several phases of this program, which composed of lots of different projects, and it's funded by UK aid. We've already heard about the disproportionate impacts of weather and climate, and particularly extreme events on the African continent and of course on its food security. So really turning that around. WISER is very much about trying to build resilience, reduce losses and economic damage. So the approach, I think this is really key here, is very much principles guided. Some of these we know, and we've heard about. Those of you who've been to similar meetings and fora around this topic will have heard much about the importance of a joined up process of co-design of the services and solutions and the projects themselves from the beginning through to inception and all the way through, this iterative working together to make sure the science pulls all the way through to impact, but also of inclusion and broad partnerships and making sure that through doing that we are having resonance and relevance to the audiences. The other theme, of course, and we've heard a lot about this in the work from ICPAC too, is the theme of innovation, and not just technological too, but the social innovation and helping really support change. Partnerships right across the value chain, be it national Met services, be it farmer groups, be it aid agencies and so on, and the long-term sustainability of weather and climate services. We have seen in this area many projects come and go, deliver something really exciting for a short period, the funding dries up and the benefits often go away. We really need to be working out how to keep things going in the long term and building capacity and capability. And through that, delivering really transformational change. And of course, as we go on that journey, learning what we've done and feeding back in through monitoring, evaluation and learning processes. I mentioned the timescales and this long-running nature of the WISER programme. Another aspect has been the regional approach to working in Africa and now actually beyond into the Asia-Pacific region. But it began really working in the Sahel and East Africa and has now been built on in terms of both the general approach to other regions of Africa, as you see there from the map, but also in terms of making sure the reason that we keep this regional approach and don't just look at the continent as a whole or a big area now is to make sure that the work that's delivered in partnership really has relevance and impact and is contextually specific. So I'll just give a couple of examples and really thinking again about the lessons I think we've learned in delivering some of the projects under the WISER programme. The first one here is from the national project in Rwanda, where, linking to the excellent work of ICPAC colleagues, one of the key things to me is delivering operational impact-based early warning systems, which I think really can then help to have a real benefit in terms of people understanding what the changes in extremes, what the warnings actually mean, and the action that they can take based on them. But also embracing, as we saw from the IGAD-ICPAC presentation, also the importance of risk-based approaches and building on multiple models, probabilities and outcomes to try and give people a sense of the likelihood and the urgency of those warnings. The other one really, I think, we've heard too about this that's really key, particularly partly in the technical sense with the capacity building, but also the human sense of that, of the training and capacity building, and making sure that we embed and build together the right skills for taking forward and making the best out of these innovations that we make together. In Uganda, similarly, the goals of the work there were largely the same as those of WISER as a whole, building resilience, building improved uptake and quality of weather and climate services. I think to me, one of the key things I'd like to outline here is the importance of bringing in broad partnerships right through the value chain here. We see the user groups all the way from religious groups, youth groups, aid workers, through to farmers, government and beyond. So actually the more people in that value chain you can bring into the picture, the more resonance and impact the climate services have. The other one, in a sense of capacity building and long-term impact, has been around data rescue and digitising paper records and other records of observations that can then support the development, evaluation and improvement of weather and climate services, but also simply our understanding of weather patterns in the region. The other one too, I think, in terms of the people side of things and making sure that those services have an impact, is the work that's been done to translate the forecast into 22 local languages and use 13 different channels of getting the information out. They might be quite simple, they might be very high-tech solutions across the WISER projects, but it's really about using the most appropriate method that has the biggest impact. So really, just to sum up, I'm not going to read all of these points out in detail, but really to me, I think there are two key themes here. One is around the long-term sustainability and scaling and making sure benefits that we deliver on the journey towards resilience have that long-term impact. And certainly funding and long-term finance and business models are really important there, working to embed new tools and innovation within local and existing systems, but also to me very much at the centre of delivering benefits in terms of risk. Early warning systems and climate services is centering things around people, and that brings in everything from combining lived experience and physical science all the way through to making sure that we improve the access and usability of climate services too. And I'd just like to reflect finally a little bit on some of the things I think that I've certainly heard in rooms discussing climate resilience and food systems relevant here. The importance of systems approaches, bringing all the actors to the table. I mentioned that earlier. I think also making sure we're outcomes focused. What is the outcome that we actually want to see? Because we can then work back from there to the solutions, making sure the solutions are locally relevant, matching the increasingly technological and high-tech digital solutions with the local context and how they can have an impact. But really critically on the people side, making sure that we're embedding things in practice, in demonstration, that people can see and touch and feel and engage in on the ground. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Pete, for also keeping time. We'll welcome our next presenter, Professor Harald Kunstmann, who will be presenting on behalf of Dr. George. Dr. George, maybe get up and wave. So he'll be giving a presentation for two. Welcome.
Yeah, thank you very much for this introduction and for this opportunity to present joint efforts between Europe and Africa on, let's say, latest developments in the field of sub-seasonal to seasonal predictions and how they can contribute for being prepared for droughts. The Karlsruhe Institute of Technology is a German university and research center. We have roughly 22,000 students, and we, in fact, work quite intensively in different parts of the African continent. It is West Africa, it is Central and East Africa, and it is also in South Africa. It is not that much in the media in Europe, I need to say, that we are informed about, let's say, what is really going on in East Africa. But that shows, again, the situation, a very latest news from the World Health Organization saying that nearly 15 million people are really at the moment affected seriously from the prolonged drought and also the flooding. And that shows that, yeah, we have this need for proactive water management. We need to be prepared. The better we know what we are going to approach, the better we can act in advance. And that is exactly what we contribute to this societal relevant topic. It is sub-seasonal to seasonal predictions. While our focus in research has been for a long time the question, what do we need to expect till end of the century or the middle of the century? Now we became aware for improved preparedness, we need to address a different time scale. We need to address the time scale of weeks and months from now, because that would allow us for improved decision planning in all fields of agriculture, in water resources management, in hydroelectric power management. And in fact, in the meantime, yes, we are able to better and better predict anomalous hydrometeorological conditions up to 7 months ahead. How does that work? European Center for Medium Range Weather Forecast, for example, ECMWF, they provide so-called seasonal predictions, global seasonal predictions. In fact, that is a very long-term, 7 months weather forecast with perturbed initial conditions, and then the model is forecasting several months ahead. That is ensemble information, which means at the end we have probability information, and that allows decision making under uncertainty. When it comes to the questions of floods, however, we need a much shorter prediction forecast horizon, and that is up to several days, several weeks. That is what we call the sub-seasonal, and then that needs to be seamlessly integrated into the seasonal predictions. And that is what we currently try to develop, a seamless integration of sub-seasonal and seasonal forecasts based on ensembles and therefore probability approaches. We are currently working in quite a lot of different projects and initiatives in different parts of Africa. All of them are related to early warning, to water availability, to improved forecasting. You see some of them mentioned here. And in fact, all of them require that it is not only research as traditional universities usually do it. No, it is a lot on working jointly together, integrating capacity building, sharing sandwich PhD students for examples, and yeah, it's a lot on knowledge transfer. I would like to show you one project in more detail. It is the Seamless Prediction System project of the Blue Nile, in which we currently also work. And you might be aware of the importance of the Blue Nile. It is the main tributary of the Nile, and if you combine it with the Teketse Adbara, it is nearly 90% of the water of the river Nile, which is originating here in the highlands of Ethiopia. And of course, there are heavy dependence on the Nile's water resources, which originates actually in Ethiopia. And of course, a big dam is currently built, and that of course can also cause tensions. And that means a transboundary, sustainable and proactive water resource management is needed. What we do in a joint cooperation, it is not that, let's say in Germany, we are the experts of the Blue Nile, no, but we have methods available that might be of interest in improved management of water management in the region. And that is why we currently jointly develop a meteorological, hydrological forecasting system for the transboundary water management of the Blue Nile River. And it's on co-development. It's in co-design. Here you see some expressions. That was roughly 1 month ago when we were able to bring together European scientists and Sudanese and Ethiopian and Kenyan scientists in the city of Addis Ababa discussing jointly, let's say, the required and necessary next steps. And it is mainly two methods, two technical approaches where I would say that makes it very interesting to work in this kind of consortium. First of all, it is what we call cloud-ready software development. Traditionally, we have our computer, our desktop computer, we do our own analysis, but once the software changes, once the compiler changes, once the employee changes, then there's always the risk that the method and the tool is not working anymore. So the solution is to work, to transfer local workflows to cloud-optimized infrastructures and services, which means that you communicate via a cloud, to your data. Cloud-optimized data storage are necessary. They make data accessible over the internet. And we also work with a technique which is called containerization, which means we decouple software from the host system. That ensures a consistent use of libraries and versions, and we can more easily scale and deploy this kind of model systems. The second innovation comes from the use of artificial intelligence, a rapidly developing field. And what we do here is that we use these raw forecasts, for example, of ECNWF, and they have still severe limitations, but we know we can improve them significantly. We did that previously with statistical methods, and now we continue with AI methods. For example, convolutional neural networks, Fourier transformers, GLNs, vision transformers, and then we are better and better able to predict on a local scale what we expect till, let's say, in the next weeks and months. This is now one example. The last rainy season in Ethiopia and in the Horn of Africa, a forecast issued in April for example, now the month of July. It forecasted rather anomalous wet conditions in the highland of Ethiopia, but much drier conditions in the lowlands and in Sudan. And we can, of course, also transfer that in precipitation in millimeter. That is one example. Albeit at the moment, it's not the rainy season, but this is an example of the very latest forecast now, issued now beginning of December, for the region of the Blue Nile. And you see left, you see the temperature forecast from December till June. And right is the precipitation forecast. Precipitation forecasting is always, let's say, more difficult, but for the temperature development, you already see very clear indications that with rather high probability that the region approaches very hot conditions in the coming 7 months. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. We will now take questions for the first 3. I know I don't want to wait until the end, because the scientists in the room, I'm sure you're itching to get your questions in. I know my ICPAC colleagues probably have some questions for Kit. So do we have a mic that's moving around? So raise your hands if you have a question. We can take maybe the first 3 questions. Any brave soul who wants to start us off? There's a question there. Asheta here has a question. Yeah. Anyone else? Any other question? We have a third question at the back. Okay, let's take the first 3.
Thank you very much, Stefan Umborg, WMO. I really enjoyed the presentations, and the seasonal to sub-seasonal predictions is so critical for water management, for energy, irrigation management, etc., etc. All agreed. The seasonal to sub-seasonal climate outlook, I think we can generate. I think you demonstrated that. But then there's the complexity of hydrology, you know, the reservoir operations and all things which are very difficult to have that have operational data for that, or even be able to predict that. And partly they are driven by not only by physical decision making, but also by other policies. Huh? And how do you incorporate that to make also season to sub-seasonal hydrological predictions, so on top of the climate predictions?
So that's one question for Professor Harald. Let's take the first 3 or 4.
Thank you very much for the presenters and moderator. My name is Ishete Dejen. I'm working for IGAD Secretariat, Agriculture and Environment Division. And my issue here is with regard to the services. It should reach to the different target groups. There is a very good product that we have, but it should really help the community through extension service. For example, if you tell the rainfall distribution for the coming 46 days, the farmers will adapt themselves to grow early maturing variety that can fit with the amount of rainfall and temperature. So from our side, that is really critical. The second issue is in terms of transboundary water resource management. Actually, it is good to generate the science. Since it is a really sensitive area, the IGAD is managing the transboundary dimension of the water resource as a regional block. Maybe with our ICPAC and the IGAD team, that science-based information can help, because transboundary natural resource management needs development of trust to do that. It's not dry science that will help for the management of that one. The other thing I see in the Nile meeting in Addis Ababa, Bahardar University has Blue Nile Water Institute, but it is not there. Maybe it is good to consider Bahardar University in that aspect, because the source of the Blue Nile is Lake Tana, where Bahardar University is located. Thank you.
Okay, let's take the last 2 for this first round.
Good morning. My name is François-Xavier Mbabazi. I'm the Chief Executive Officer of Ingabo Farmers Organization from Rwanda. Thank you for the panelists for the good presentation. It's just an observation. I think there is a need for strong partnership between research institutions, universities, and the farmers through the farmers organization. As those farmers are among end users of climate or meteo information. This should tackle challenges like access to meteo or climate information, translation into languages which are accessible or understandable by farmers, accurate and timely information, but also capacity building. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Lastly, Dr. Ahmed.
Good afternoon, all. My name is Abdi Fidar. I come from IGAD as well. My question is regarding the seasonal to sub-season forecast. When we talk about that aspect, what was the confidence level of or probability before we use the artificial intelligence? And how much has artificial intelligence improved our level of confidence of forecasting, the forecasting level?
Thank you. Maybe because Dr. Harald, you have the most questions, we'll finish with you. We can start with Dr. Ahmed. You can talk about the question on the last mile. And then Pete, since you work in Rwanda, maybe you can talk a bit more about what you're doing in terms of working with Farmers Association in the project. And then Dr. Harald, you have like so many questions. We can finish with you. So Dr. Ahmed, go ahead.
Thank you very much. I think one of the critical components of early warning system is to reach the last mile. The challenge to that is quite a number of tools have been developed, even at ICPAC, including mobile features, mobile applications that works even in feature phones, not advanced phones. But the real issue is not a technology, in my opinion. A real issue is issue of coordination and mandate. For example, as ICPAC, we are limited to send bulk messages to communities because that's the mandate of the national hydrometeor institutions. But we need to work with them in order to release some of the informations. I think we have tried with ICPAC developed tool or web application, not web, mobile application called Husika, which has a capacity to distribute and disseminate text messages to even feature phones. So I think in the coming years, we need to collaborate with different initiatives, including Early Warning for All, the African Multi-Hazard Early Warning Systems, and others, to support member states to utilize such easy-to-use open platforms so that they can easily disseminate such informations. We have seen some innovative ways from member countries like Somalia also, where they have embedded within the call system. So when you call someone, before he picks, I think the message is already, the early warning information is already disseminated. As it calls, the person can listen before even he picks it. So I think that is where we are heading, but always important to work, for example, with local farmer organizations, extension workers, and so on, so that such messages are targeted with or cognizant of that mandate limitations also of IGAD, ICPAC, and also member states and local governments. Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Pete.
Yeah, I think part of the question was around understanding the quality of sort of medium range forecasts. I think this is really critical in the communication. I mean, I think as we heard from both Ahmed and Harald, really, you know, because they are inherently, these systems produce probabilistic information. You run lots of different simulations because of the variability, you know, natural chaos, if you like, in the system, then they naturally produce probabilities and lots of possible outcomes. So that's one of the issues, in a sense, in that's one dimension that gives you some sense of confidence, and where, you know, the bulk of those predictions sit in one side. I mean, as we saw, you know, the challenges of that are that varies from region to region and variable to variable, and particularly so for precipitation. I think increasingly there's also the need to combine that with what we understand about the actual skill of the forecast in presenting the events. So there's almost a two-dimensional problem there, and I think that's, it is quite complex information, and there are several aspects to that. One is, did it get the forecast right, but also did it get it right for the right reasons, and were the factors driving the circulation patterns and so on right, and everything in that, the bigger climate factors. So it's quite a complex area. I think I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think you've covered Dr. Fide's question a little, but Harald, we had a lot of questions for you, how you integrate the unconventional data, questions on the uncertainty of the sub-seasonal 7-month forecast. So you can go ahead.
Yeah, let me also give some further comments. First of all, not mentioned but done is that these meteorological forecasts subsequently are used to drive hydrological models, agricultural yield models, and by that way, of course, we transform this purely meteorological information into land surface information, and then can even provide more information. We even do that with malaria transmission modeling. Yeah? So subsequent models are used here already. Different target groups have been mentioned, and that, of course, can only be achieved in this joint cooperation. As I said, our, let's say, academic experience is in the development of methods, but the application of the methods and then the deployment and how it is then used in ICPAC or at the national services, you are the experts how to distribute the information and how to approach the target groups. Yes, failure risks, of course, is a big topic. it's a question on probability, and that we need to learn. I mean, at which threshold probability we do any action. This is not a purely scientific question. That needs to be communicated. Yeah, if I say with 80% probability you get a very hot season, is that already sufficient or not? By 80%, you know, we'd say yes, but if it's 30, would you act or not? That needs to be discussed and developed jointly. Access to information is very crucial. We think it should be free access. That is why we go for this cloud-ready development. Very transparent code development, stored in GitHub and GitLab. People can download it, you can further deploy and modify it. I think this publicly available information, it should be free. Yes, and the level of improvement was also a question. We publish this kind of improvement, better improvement in scientific papers. The performance indicators to describe this probabilistic information, they are not that trivial. That is why in public presentations we don't present it, because it is rather complex statistical performance measures, but of course we share that information in scientific publications. And yes, I can tell you, the performance has increased significantly, and it has reached values where it really makes sense to apply it in decision making.
Thank you very much. That's a very good point on understanding probabilities and understanding when to make decisions based on different thresholds. So if you have any more questions, please, we'll have time at the end. Hold your questions. Let's hear from the last two speakers. First, we have Dr. Tim Benton, who is going to talk to us about, Professor Tim Benton, who will talk to us about the role of food systems transformations in building resilience in Africa. I think we've heard about what the science is doing at a regional level. Wise has talked about continental. We even heard about the science available up to 7 months now. Professor Tim, just let us know what you're doing, the work you're doing, and how that is helping build resilience.
Okay, well, thank you very much. So completely different sort of thought process in my comments here. Building resilience is, of course, not just to do with the local hazards that climate is going to throw at us. If you look at the events of the last 5 years, perhaps even the last 7 or 8 years, what we have is an overriding trend of increasing contestation in the multilateral world. We have shooting wars that we weren't expecting. We have had trade wars. We have north-south, east-west distrust. We have, of course, the growing impact of climate change, which is disrupting supply chains, stimulating human displacement. All of that then creates a whole lot of other geopolitical tensions to do with the recipient countries for the human displacement, food insecurity, and a whole range of different things that just make everything much more fragile as we look ahead. And if you take the trends of the last 5 to 10 years forwards, we are likely to be living in a world which is much more volatile, not just from a climate perspective, but volatile from a geopolitical and geostrategic perspective. And you just have to look at what's happened post the Ukrainian invasion of, the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the extra tensions in the system now, what happened with respect to food prices, energy prices, and how that affected every country in the world. Food price inflation, of course, is a global thing, and it's not just those countries that import food from Ukraine that suffered from food price inflation. Of course, many African countries do import from the Russia and Ukraine, but it has been a global thing. So given volatility, given geostrategic risk, given the potential for a deglobalization rather than a globalization, what does this mean for a vision for what would be a resilient, sustainable, nutrition-providing food system within Africa? Because in a sense, there has always been that kind of background. Food is a driver of economic development. Africa thinking about accessing export markets as they, as countries develop more ability to increase productivity and so on. if the world is no longer moving towards a globally embedded system and a much more regional embedded system, what does that mean in terms of what crops should be grown, how should they be grown, and so on. And of course, food has been absolutely prevalent at COP28. We helped, at Chatham House, we helped launch yesterday the Alliance of Champions for Food System Transformation, which is a group of small countries, including from Africa, Sierra Leone and Rwanda, who really want to drive food system transformation forwards. We've also got the 160 odd countries around the world who've signed the Emirates Declaration about food system transformation. But the challenges are always multiple, in the sense of we know pollution, biodiversity loss, we know greenhouse gas emissions, we know food is important for economic growth, we know food is absolutely crucial for food security, we know food is really important in multiple dimensions. But there are two kind of big trade-offs that have to be navigated in thinking about food systems of the future. Food security in the sense of national security. So is there enough food for your country to be secure and not be in a famine situation or an unrest situation? Food security versus economic growth and trade. Are you producing for yourself or are you producing for the global market? That's one trade-off. And then the other kind of big set of trade-offs is sustainability and resilience versus efficiency. Obviously, if you're moving towards much more large acre agriculture, maize for global markets as well as local markets, super efficient but very fragile to climate change and other impacts. Pete and I have been involved in a project which is just about to publish a paper in Nature Food, which is looking at an integrated food climate, food systems assessment framework called IFEED in Zambia, Malawi, Tanzania and South Africa, which allows exploration of different local scenarios and how that might work out. The key result from that is there is a need to diversify agriculture to supply nutrition security. But of course, if you don't, you then have to rely more on trade to import the nutrition that otherwise you would grow at home. And in a sense, whether or not it's a good idea to grow more locally for your local nutrition security depends on the state of the world going forward. And as I am emphasizing, the state of the world going forward is much more uncertain than the state of the world that we had hoped. So food system transformation, to wind up, is necessary, as agreed by so many heads of state, but it does require change in thinking, linking diets, trade, environmental impacts, environmental risk, plus economic growth and livelihoods. And rather than just take as read that what we grow today, we're going to continue to grow into the future and grow more of, we actually have to think much more from a kind of root and branch assessment. What is grown, how it is grown, how much of it is grown, and where. Those are key questions. And what it is best to do as we look ahead over the next decades really depends on the future state of the world. Because if we do the wrong thing, we lock us into a state of low resilience, or we lock us into a state of investment in functioning food systems that become increasingly dysfunctional because of the change in the world. So we need to really think not just about the scale of months and how we can use early warning systems, or the scale of years and how we can develop food security locally, but we also need to think in terms of decades. So are we going to be in a situation where the world is really contested, and therefore we really need to be much more self-sufficient, and we really need to link agricultural policy to health policy, forget a bit about trade and the risks that come from trade? Or are we going to be in a world where everybody wakes up one morning and suddenly we start cooperating and making huge progress on climate change? And as Al Jaber said a couple of weeks ago, COP28 is a kind of last test of multilaterality. Are we going to come out of this well, or are we going to increasingly move into a world that is really difficult, and therefore the needs of local security and local food systems are really, really very different from those that we imagined a few years ago. Over.
Thank you very much, Prof. As you can see from the applause, you've touched a nerve and making us look at food from just from more than just a productivity lens to start thinking about the transboundary risks. And I know when you talked about food as food security is a matter of national security. I know my brother Kemolis will start running, and Kemoli, just hold your questions. I know you have many. We'll hear from our last speaker before we open up the floor to hear from your experiences, to hear from your questions for this great panel. Lauren is representing the Farmers Association, so at least we do have a voice from the ground. And Lauren, hearing from everybody, and I'm sure some of the information you're hearing after hearing you speak at yesterday's panel, you're seeing that there is a lot more than information that you probably knew was there. And can you tell us more about the perspective of the farmers? How is your association supporting farmers to talk to basically deal with some of the scenarios that Prof has just mentioned, and some of the compounding and cascading risks that have been talked about for the last hour or so?
All right. Thank you so much. I was hoping that I get here because I've sat and I'm cold. And I've sat with people who don't feel cold. I hope someone regulates the AC. Anyway, so I work for the Kenya National Farmers Federation, which is a national farm organization in Kenya. It's member-based. And I've sat and listened, but before I say my thinking on that, I will just say that some of the key things that we do as the farmer organization in Kenya is we build capacities, and we share information, especially on a number of things. We do extension services because coming from Kenya, extension is literally something that was devolved to the county level and has no funds. So we try and come into that. We do have an information sharing platform, which is very basic, a USSD platform. And in that USSD platform, I'm happy to say we actually steal information. I don't think we steal information from ICPAC because it's in the public domain. But we translate them into very small pieces of information on advisory on weather. We also do, of course, general agricultural advisory in that USSD platform, and then we also do market facilitation, which is very important, of course, for us as a federation. And the other thing is, of course, we are also big, our core mandate is lobby advocacy and policy action, so we are big in the agricultural policy landscape in Kenya. And we are also very deliberate in how we represent our farmers and how we actually also organize. We are very deliberate because we have a summit that is dedicated for women. We have a summit that is dedicated for youth, and we also have a summit that is also dedicated for persons with disabilities. Of course, we know why for women, because they are the main producers in small scale, and for youth, because everyone is saying that the next frontier for youths is agriculture, but no one is supporting that frontier so that it works for the youth. And then, of course, for the persons with disabilities, because, I mean, as we already face challenges, so you can imagine, for the persons with disabilities. And yeah, that is basically what we do. So I don't know if I am going into the next question.
Yes, please just let us know what the challenges are that the farmers are facing.
All right. So maybe I don't want to talk about them as challenges because, I mean, there are always challenges, but I want to talk about them as what we need to do. And coming from the discussions we've had is, the first thing we need to do is translate research to practice. That is a link that is missing. I mean, sometimes I go to, this is one of them. There are quite a lot of information that is new every day, but that is where they stay. We present them in conferences, and They're very good. They actually can help, but that is where they stay. So we need to translate research into practice. But not just translate research into practice, is that we also need to have research that is priority or needs driven. I'm sorry to say, for a country like Kenya, research, especially in agriculture, is grant-based or loans-based. And what that happens is the person, there is always a conditionality. The person who is providing, that money drives the kind of research that you want to do. And that is not helping. So that is where we need to start when we're talking about research. But then the other thing we need to do is we have to have very accurate, reliable, and evidence-based information, including the early warning systems. We are glad that, of course, early warning systems is taking root, especially in the region. But then we need to quantify the risk. We need to, quantify the losses so that it informs even the investment that goes into it. But then we also need timely communication of this. We know, of course, the mandate of IGAD and ICPAC is at the national level. But we need now to move from that because the challenge is getting that information to the person who actually needs to use it. And then the other thing is our channels of communication. We need to be very inclusive when we're talking about channels of communication for EWS. If mobile, maybe simple things like USSD can work, that is good. But we have vernacular radio stations, especially in Kenya, which is currently gaining a lot of traction. So we need to be very thoughtful about the EWS kind of communications that goes out. And then the other thing is we need to strengthen the capacities of those communities to actually act on this information they're being told about. What exactly do you need to move? I mean, we are uprooting livelihoods, so we need to also have that planning on if we are uprooting that livelihood, how are they going to survive? So that is something else that we need to do. And then we need to look at risk transfer and social protection, of course, as part of that. Away from research and EWS, the other things we need to think about is we actually need finance for adaptation and mitigation, for adaptation increased, and without conditions. I mean, 72% of adaptation funds that go into Africa is loans. So that is already a challenge. We need funds that are not with a condition on them. But then it's also a challenge for Africa that if we are given funds to adapt, do we really know what we want to do with them? So we also need to have from Africa a plan on how we utilize these funds. The other thing, of course, is mitigation and adaptation solutions that are very context-specific. What works in Africa does not work in Asia. Yeah? So we need to tailor-make solutions that work at a specific context, and with this we need to co-create. Solutions sometimes are with the farmers themselves, so co-create. Have the science backed by the solutions or indigenous knowledge. And the other thing, of course, we need to do for resilience building is we have to address the root causes of the challenges that we have. The social and economic inequalities, when we're talking about social and economic inequalities, we mean, of course, we need to have very targeted interventions that work for women because, of course, land tenure is something that is very important for women. When we're talking about land agriculture as a system that works for women, is that they have access but not control. So they have to have both access and control for it to work and actually be sustainable. I mean, we all know that food and nutrition security at the household level is left basically for the woman. She's the one who plans what they're going to eat, and she actually is the one who eats last. Yeah? So it has to work for them. It has to also work for the youth, of course. That means we have to have finances. We have to find a way of, if we cannot provide them with land at the point of when they need them, then we have to find areas in the value chain that work for the youth that probably need something like ICT or technology that then they can chip into. And then, of course, we need to think about the environmental injustices. And finally, is the other thing we need to do is we need to work in a cross-sectoral manner. You know, you cannot take food systems away from water. You cannot take water away from energy. So you have to have solutions, or even as you're working, you have to have solutions that work for water, energy, and the food nexus. And then, of course, the final thing, there's too much about resilience that we really need to rethink if we want to transform the food systems. But finally, I think the most important thing is, Pete did mention it, on outcomes. We need to be accountable for the money that we put into adaptation or mitigation. And by being accountable is that we need to actually justify that in 3 years, we had this money put into this, and this is the outcome that is there. And then, of course, we need to be, there's really a need for effectiveness, but finally, there's also need for a lot of transparency for the climate change crisis to actually get better. Thank you.
Thank you very much. As you can hear, a lot of appreciation for your thoughts. Ladies and gentlemen, we've reached that point where we're handing over the conversation back to you. If you'll allow us the first round of questions, if we can have it for Prof and Lauren, and then the last round, we will open it up if you have any additional questions for the rest of the panel that you're not able to ask before, and then we will wrap it up. So if you have any questions for Prof or for Lauren, please raise your hand. We have 2 questions there.
I'm Kemoli Sagala. I think maybe Lauren can try to answer this. My concern is great presentations, great science. I happen to be I sit with politicians and policymakers, but I'm also a scholar. My problem is, and perhaps I'm putting to you all, is how do you get these politicians and policymakers to digest this science? Because if you look at the Horn of Africa, the flooding we're having at the moment, there was science, there was data that showed that the flooding was coming. How do we get this, and of course the others, we call them climate change deniers, to really appreciate the advancement in the predictive models that we have?
We have another question next to him.
Thank you so much. My name is Leonard. I'm from Rwanda, and I'm glad for this kind of conversation. That was really amazing. I have comments, because in Rwanda, I'm a farmer, and maybe professionally, I'm environmentalist, but I like agriculture because, of course, we do all things, but at the end, we need food. Like farmers in Rwanda, I may say that the challenge we met, there are so many, but I may maybe talk about drought. Like in dry season, we met a challenge where most of activity stops because it's so hard, because for people who knows Rwanda, it's a mountainous country, and most of the time it's so hard to do agriculture in mountains because again, access to water on using to irrigation is so hard. I was just wondering, because she mentioned that they try to support farmers, maybe in terms of capacity, which strategies they use to reach those local farmers, because it is very, very important to reach local farmers, not just saying we are trying to support farmers, because I've been seeing that most of people are supporting those farmers who are on the spotlight, I can say like that, who are known, but there are other farmers who are there in the grassroots community who don't know, who has no access to, technology, who has no information. How do you reach them? Again, I want to comment that maybe as a farmer, what I realized that farmers need something special. Farmers need support. Farmers need fund. Maybe there could be something specific to agriculture that is going to help farmers who want to do agriculture, because for example, in Rwanda, we met a crisis that caused by climate change, I may say in May, where we lost more than 130 people. and so many crops, houses destroyed. And yes, of course, we are glad that this loss and damage fund is going to be established, but I want to talk that farmers, those who want to do agriculture, those who made climate crisis, they need support to empower if we want to build this resilience. Again, I want to talk about... yes.
So we give other people a chance as well.
Thank you so much.
Okay. You have one more at the front.
Thank you so much. I think Doreen answered some of my questions, so that's why I'm directing it to you. You raised two things. One is localizing the early warning mechanism. That was my question. How do we localize it to the local communities who are really the beneficiaries, should be the direct beneficiaries? And then also, how do we link the early warning mechanism response to investment and support on adaptation? And my concern goes especially to the type of farmers almost the early warning mechanism does not reach out to. And those are the pastoral communities. Because for the pastoral communities, you go beyond the knowledge, the information, but heavily on the response to prevent the issues of not accessing water. If you recall, between 2021 to 2023 almost, the whole of Horn of Africa, actually pastoralist communities lost millions of their cattle simply because they cannot transfer the knowledge, the information to technology that can actually preserve the grass during the times of plenty, or mobility of grass from the areas of plenty to the areas of scarcity. So unless there is that kind of heavy linkage between the early warning mechanism and the adaptation investment that is targeting those vulnerable communities, we still have those disasters even when the system is functioning.
Thank you very much. Maybe we take the first two. Prof, you can talk about the information that you produce at Chatham House. How do you get policymakers to pay attention, actually do something with it?
Yeah, without sounding too depressing, I don't think ultimately politicians work on evidence. Politicians work on incumbency and preserving power. And preserving power in democratic is about making sure that they're appealing to the electorate, which is not necessarily in terms of doing the right thing. So I'm kind of coming towards the end of my career, and I'm struggling with governments because I do think that there is a real challenge for us in the sense of, you know, all of this, oh yes, we've got a loss and damage fund now, but we collated a disaster database earlier in the year. There have been well over 450 notable extreme weather events around the world, 106 countries. 25,000 people killed at least, probably twice as much, 3 times as much, 65 million people displaced. A single one of those 450 weather events would take up the entire loss and damage fund. So we've got a hell of a long way to go. Lloyd's of London are saying that loss and damage will be between $1 and $3 trillion a year over the next decade. So the notion that there will be public money available from the rich world to the poor world, I don't think is ever going to happen. And so it then comes down to what will incumbent power respond to? And very often that is, in a sense, they respond to issues to do with how they get rich, how they stay in power, and so on. So it is depressing. I am very depressed at COP28 because I can just see we are not going the speed that we need to go to solve these issues. And there isn't a simple answer. But, you know, I came into government about 15 years ago hoping that government will do the right thing when push came to shove, and I'm no longer sure that that is actually the case. So it requires all of us as citizens to champion doing the right thing and make it possible to open up the political space where politicians will actually drive what is necessary to drive, and each of us in our own way can act as a change maker in the political process. And if we just sit back and allow the situation to continue, then change won't happen. Sorry, that's a bit depressing. I'm very tired after the end of 12 days of COP.
Thank you, Prof. You had it here. Change begins with you. Lauren, you've had a few comments and questions on how you reach the end users, how you reach the vulnerable farmers. So maybe you can comment on that before we take the last round of questions.
All right, so we are actually a member-based organization. We are a farmer federation, and we are organized from the national to the county to the ward to the cooperative farmer association level to the small unit that is a farmer. So then information also flows in that way. Yes.
So I will take maybe two final pressing questions. There's one here and one at the back.
My name is Runyararo Munondo. I'm from Zimbabwe, but currently based in Kenya. My question is probably linked to what Prof has just mentioned around the loss and damage fund. And I'm wondering, looking at this significant role that anticipatory action and early warning systems can play in reducing loss and damage, what is the outlook like in terms of the percentage or the level of funding that can potentially come from loss and damage and support maybe strengthening of early warning systems and anticipatory action?
And then we can take the last question at the back.
Hello, I am Chana Sondoga from Zimbabwe. I am a leader of a women organization. I represent women in agriculture, a national body of our country, Zimbabwe. And as well, I am a CEO of another women association. We cascade down from the Apex board down to the rural women. And I'm also a farmer, basically in Zimbabwe. We deal with women farmers. We have got a lot of challenges. I was so glad hearing from a fellow woman there. We feel we are into it because we are the farmers who are right doing it from the ground level. We have so many challenges concerning the climate, but the major challenge is, yes, we discuss here, this is theory. When we come to the practical side of the things, then we are failing there. We have heard, we have taken notes, videos and whatever, but when I go back, taking that information to practical or practicing that information, there's where the challenge is. As I come from Zimbabwe, not all our farmers don't have those smartphones and the like. Some of our farmers, I mean the rural farmers, they have those small phones which cannot access, WhatsApp and the like. Even the languages, some of our farmers don't understand English. Saka, I put some shona there. We need to cascade information down to the grassroots. Maybe doing some practices or whatever, practicals that we can do so that our people might understand. But as we go through, we are lacking some funding. You know, our women need capacity building and the like for them to catch up and grasp up all the theories that we have learned here. But we are still growing as women. You know, women play the most bigger role in farming. Actually, in Zimbabwe.
We are running out of time, so maybe we can, we're almost out of time, so maybe we can.
I think we have had the challenges.
Yes.
If we can come together, make partnerships so that we assist us as women in Zimbabwe who are doing agriculture. As of now, the weather is not favorable in Zimbabwe. I talk with the women every day. It's so hot.
Thank
and
you.
We are in trouble.
Thank you. So what we'll do is we'll take a 1-minute wrap-up from everyone, starting with Dr. Jorg, who did not get to speak. You have a question as well? A short. So we'll have 1 minute from him and 1 minute from everybody else. If you can answer a question that was asked during your 1 minute, that's fine as well.
Thank you. It's rather a question to Loreen. We talk a lot about support to farmers, and it's needed and so forth. What we don't address here is also how can we motivate for behavioral change at farmers level. Because of what I have experienced, even in my own family, you have support for 1 year, then there is a change, and then you fall back because of traditional, cultural, whatever reasons, into your old practice, behavior. What are practical instruments to change this, to overcome this? Thank you.
Okay, so we'll start with Dr. Ahmed. Go down. You can give your final comments, and if there's an answer to the questions, please go ahead.
Yes, I think as a partnership of colleagues from a regional center like ICPAC, we are very much closely working with the member states. In fact, with some pilots on the ground level, how to diversify livelihoods, but also increase household income. In Garissa, for example. I think such approaches need to be further strengthened. How regional organizations work with the national governments to support local action. I think that is the linkages that I see need to be strengthened, Linda, from my side. All the models actually need to be in support of that people-centered early warnings, where communities can benefit directly from such informations. Because, as I said, we have seen 50% reduction of impacts because of just those actions we take based on the early warning informations that need to be strengthened. Thank you.
Okay, just to generally conclude, I think these interactions of different countries is important. Why should, let's say, another European country should be involved in Africa? There are many, many reasons for that, and I think it is mainly by this joint effort that the solutions can be found, and I think many things are developing here. At the very end, it comes by sharing people, having, let's say, people being co-educated in the different countries, establishing friendships and relations over many, many years. That is actually one of the ways that this knowledge interaction is really happening. And for me personally, this is also one of the reasons why this COP is so important. Yeah? Because we come together, we exchange opinions, and we learn from each other. And it's really a two-way learning.
Thank you, Lauren.
So I don't have an answer actually, but two things from it is that we need to take farmers as partners, not beneficiaries, from the beginning of an intervention. And the other thing is we have to set expectations right from the beginning so that farmers do know exactly what it is in there for them to go into it. And that is also why it's very important to co-create solutions with them. To end is that on loss and damage fund, and this is something that I want to challenge all of us in the room, especially in Africa. If we are given the loss and damage fund today, and Dr. Lucarito is there, and I'm saying this because we were with him somewhere and he mentioned the same thing. Do we know what we really want to do with it? I think it's important as Africa to actually have a plan and then come and request for the funds that we want. And finally is that for adaptation, he mentioned that public finance might not be. Then I think it's very important that we find ways to make adaptation have a business case so that the private sector can actually invest into it. Thank you.
Dr. Pete?
Yeah, very much agree with Laureen. I think I come back to the point I made in my presentation, putting people at the centre, the outcomes focused, the solution focused, and working very much in partnership throughout that journey, but very much to enable making the decisions around resilience. And, you know, I think also in terms of that on-the-ground impact, enabling people to demonstrate, to share knowledge, to try things out in practice and really see what works.
Thank you. Last but not least.
Well, maybe last and least. Global goal and adaptation, the discussions, the negotiations show that it's really difficult to think through what adaptation means and how it might be financed. It's not that there isn't enough money in the world, it's that that money is concentrated in too few people with too much power. And whilst I fully agree, in a sense, the answer is to build a business model that rewards resilience building, until we do something about capitalism, all that will do is make the rich even richer and slightly more resilient in their cash flow rather than the poor better off. So I think that there is a real need to think about how we can build public goods back into capitalism rather than just increase the inequality in the world so that 50% of the world's wealth can fit in a single bus and the rest is just, yeah. Sorry, I know I'm too heretical sometimes, but I think we need to start thinking about how we can use proper instruments to reduce global inequality, and that's not just take Bill Gates' money all the time and worship Bill Gates for being a nice bloke because he's giving a little bit away, but actually find a way of reducing the inequality of economics and the inequality of power.
So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. We are time up. We'll take a picture with the guests. We'd like to thank Abebe for organizing us and bringing us together. Abebe. I hope you've enjoyed the conversation as much as I have. Thank you again. Director, Dr. Tan, if you could come and join us and we can take a picture.
Thank you.